Is Marla Newman, who is the city's community development director. If the work plan this year, if you remember, we were going to talk about some areas, how cities and counties both officially work together, and then some spaces where cities and counties might work a little bit better together. So Marla is going to give you I'm going to call it a presentation, but more of a discussion. Feel free to kind of chime in and ask questions anywhere you have. She's got a couple of slides to talk from, but I think she's got a lot more to share than just what's on those slides. But we'll tell you a little bit about her department here in the city and what they do, and then talk a little more specifically about affordable housing projects, how the city funds those, what we're involved in, and then we'll kind of naturally and organically kind of go into that. Where does the county operate in that space? After Marla gets done, we've got another couple of slides that Janice will do for you on what some of our peer jurisdictions and how they work together. But without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Marla, and I'm going to queue up her presentation. So I'll let her kind of introduce herself, and then Marla, let me know when you want me to bring your presentation up, and I'll screen share it for everybody. You're on mute right now, Marla.
All right, great entry. Good morning, everyone. Again, Marla Newman, Community Development Director for the city. And I've had the opportunity to be in this role. I just had my 5th anniversary last month. So I've been here a good little while in the city. I actually relocated here for the position from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I got my start doing this work, I'll just say over 25 years ago. Actually in Kansas City, Missouri, which is where I'm a native from. So that's where I'm from. But been doing this work both in the nonprofit sector, as well as working with nonprofit organizations, community development corporations, with a national, what they call intermediary, called Local Initiative Support Corporation. There was an office here. They called it LISC for short. And so I worked for LISC actually for 5 years in Kansas City. So that's kind of how I got my teeth cut on this work. But part of it too was seeing the change in my community in Kansas City. I remember what it was like when I was growing up. I then saw the decline over years, and I'd gone away to school and had the opportunity to come back to Kansas City to live, and started to see this renaissance. And it was exciting, and I wanted to learn more about it. And ultimately, actually, doing this work was a change of careers for me. My background is actually in law, licensed attorney in Alabama, Texas, and Missouri. So I was kind of introduced to the work on the legal side, doing real estate transactions for community development corporations, and then found out about LISC, and it's kind of like the rest is history. I put law behind me and decided to do this full time. Excuse me. So I've had an opportunity to learn a lot about affordable housing and community development because I've had an opportunity to live and do this work in different communities, Kansas City, Baton Rouge, now here. But I've also served on a couple of national boards. A year ago, I stepped down after 10 years with the National Low Income Housing Coalition. The last 2 years of that, I was board chair. And then I also served on the board of the National Alliance of Community Economic Development Associations, and I was on that board for 8 years. So have had the great fortune of seeing what's happening at other communities around the country. I also do training for a national organization called NeighborWorks America, and their main purpose is to build and support neighborhoods and those who are doing work in neighborhoods to revitalize the neighborhoods and maintain the diversity, but the culture and traditions of those communities. Scott, if you could bring up the slides. We'll just kind of jump in a little bit about the work here in Winston. So in the community development department, you'll see that we have 5 core functions and services. The financial services is where we process payments to a lot of nonprofit organizations as well as developers who have received financing from the city through this department for housing developments. So that any invoices come in through different divisions, but then they're all managed and filtered through that financial services. So while in some respects it seems to be an inward-facing division, it actually provides a critical service to those we serve. The Neighborhood Services Division is designed to work with neighborhood associations or those in the community who would like to create a neighborhood association. We believe that the work of the city is a partnership with neighborhoods. And so we want to work hand in hand, provide whatever resources and support we can to strengthen neighborhoods, help them understand maybe how to form, how to run meetings effectively, how to get more of their neighbors to join the association, how to do projects in the neighborhood that enhance and improve the neighborhood. So anything that we can do that serves as a support mechanism for neighborhoods to increase vitality and the livability of neighborhoods, that's what our Neighborhood Services Division does. Code enforcement is probably the one that people think of the most, actually, when they think of community development. Code enforcement is our largest division, and we have neighborhood conservation officers or code officers, but then we also have a team that does what we call environmental abatements. So a lot of times illegal dumping, that team picks that up, removes graffiti, cuts high grass and weeds and things of that nature. Sometimes we say they're the division that people love to hate. Because nobody wants to get a notice of violation and so forth. But the biggest thing is with code enforcement is making sure that housing meets what we call minimum standards. And so we want to make sure that people live in safe, habitable environments. And so that's a large part of what we do, is making sure that mostly this affects rental housing. Be it single family rentals or duplexes or multifamily large developments. But we want to make sure that those property owners and those property managers keep their properties up to code. And so that's where we tend to have some of our biggest challenges, is on the code, the minimum housing situations. The next division is our lending division. And that particular division works with homeowners largely who need some type of rehabilitation work done to their homes. They might need a new roof or HVAC, plumbing, electrical, things of that nature. And so our lending division works with income qualified homeowners to facilitate getting some of those repairs done to their home. Again, those are the kinds of things that address minimum housing standards again. And so we want to make sure that those things that contribute to livability of a home are managed. And then our final division is housing and community services. So that particular division is where a lot of the money actually enters into community development. They're the portal for all of the funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. We have 4 different streams that come directly from HUD that this department manages. And I'll talk a little bit about those fund sources in a moment. But the funding is used not only to support work in the community with nonprofit organizations like ESR or the Urban League, United Way, a whole host of organizations. But this is also where developers and community development corporations come to say they need support for affordable housing development. And so that division covers both of those areas. Scott, could you advance, please? So I want to give you a quick snapshot of some of the work that's underway right now. Some of you may be familiar with the council and mayor establishing a goal last year of trying to produce 750 new housing units every year. And so that commitment was made, I believe, the end of February of last year. And so to date, from that time, we've had committed 531 units. And when we say committed, that is where the city council has taken action and agreed to provide funding to developments for housing. That total committed to date of 531 units represents 13 projects, and there are currently 81 units under construction. And I'll dig into those units in a moment as well. Overall, when we look at investments in this last year, the city so far has committed $18,912,674 towards these affordable housing developments, and then $65,926,474 has been is the other part of what we call the total development cost. So when we get to a next slide, you'll see that these two combined will be the sum total that we have under total development costs. That kind of gives us a leverage rate of about 3.4. So roughly for every dollar that the city has invested, there's another almost $3.50 that goes into these developments. And then overall, to the right, you'll see where we target the work at different income ranges. Last year, the city council passed an ordinance that says that when we put our dollars into developments, or if the city uses city land into a development, then we want to hit certain targets of affordability. Oftentimes we talk about affordable housing, but generally people talk about what you see on here as 60% or above, or up to 80% of AMI. But what we find is there is a significant number of people who are really at that 30% AMI. Some people who fit into that income range might otherwise be eligible for public housing, but there's not enough public housing in the community to serve that need. And so the city has committed to also trying to work towards meeting the needs of people who are at that income threshold. A number of the folks who also fit in that threshold might be experiencing homelessness right now. And so, finding a place that they can afford, maybe based on their disability status or limited income potential, they would fall in that range. And so the city has committed to helping create more housing for individuals at that level. Scott,
Marla?
Mm-hmm.
So I can ask a couple of questions.
Sure.
So first question is, the annual goal is 750 units per year. Was there discussion of how much is needed? Like how many?
Yes, definitely. So in late 2018, the city had a housing study and needs assessment that was done by Enterprise Community Partners. And overall, that study said that over the next 10 years at that point, the city needed 16,000 units of housing. And so, if we did this for 10 years, we're looking at roughly half of that, right?
This is like a 25-year project, it looks like.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question, just trying to understand more about this pie chart with the AMIs on it.
Mm-hmm.
So first, are those percentages, the 68, the 14, 14, 4, are those of need or of those of the projects that have been committed?
Of the projects that have been committed.
Okay. Oh, cool. So lots of 30%. That's nice to see. Second, when you talk about the AMI, is that for like a specific household size, or is that for the normal household size in Forsyth County?
So I'm going to answer that two ways. So okay. AMI is based on household size.
Yeah.
At the income level. So it fluctuates based on household size. For Winston-Salem, though, that's the AMI for Winston-Salem. And in this moment, I believe that it would also cover the county, because we are what they call a metropolitan statistical area. Yeah. Right.
So my main question when asking about that actually is, so are the units is there an attempt to match the units like 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedrooms to the household size of the people with the 30% AMI? Like, is it, if it's a family of 4, is there an attempt to make sure that the commitments are for like, 2 bedrooms and not 1 bedrooms? I'm not sure if I'm getting that across.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yes, so the developers come to us, essentially they have to do a market study, and then they have to talk about, who it is they're attempting to serve. Are they trying to serve families, or are they looking to serve, 1 or 2 person households? So all of those things do factor in to the type of development that they're asking us to assist them with supporting.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Ms. Newman. I have a question as well.
Mhm.
And thank you. You're doing an excellent job. I've watched you before and you're very detailed and I like that. But my question is, since I know this plan is like so many years in the making and it's now just manifesting, and with that in mind, how far do, or if we do, go back to make adjustments for those incomes, as well as are we talking about when we say marginalized or low income families, do that mean that they are the only ones that can apply for these units, or is there going to be a merge of populations of incomes in these in the housing?
So 2 answers to that one as well. One, we want to encourage, and the new policy council adopted last June promotes mixed income communities. So so the idea is to have people at the different income ranges like you see here, in addition to having units that are affordable or available for individuals who earn more than 80% of AMI, so that you have a true mix of incomes. So you have low and moderate, and you have what we might otherwise call market rate units, right? It kind of a as they say, a throwback to the way things used to be in communities where people just live together.
Right.
All of the incomes, that wasn't the issue. People just live together. So trying to kind of replicate that, and there are a lot of sociological reasons for that as well. As far as I'm trying to make sure I answer the other part of the question. So we'll make the units available because that is part of the policy now. Okay. Now I think I've missed part of your other question. I gave too much detail and then forgot the other question. I'm sorry. Could you repeat it?
How far, since the plan is so many years in the making and it's now just manifesting so many years later, did we take in consideration any adjustments in the requirement for income basis? And one other question, what about those with disabilities? Are they included in this?
They are. Okay. So I'll take the income adjustments first. So every year HUD publishes what they call income limits. And so that's where we get our AMI numbers that we use. And so every year when we're asked to support a project, we say, okay, how many at this income level, how many at that income level, based on the current guidelines. So it always adjusts annually. And so we comply with that. As it relates to individuals with disabilities, that's one reason why we made the commitment at that 30% level, because a number of people who are with disabilities fit within that income range. Sometimes, people with SSI or Social Security, right? And even some individuals who are experiencing homelessness are actually considered disabled, because they have disabilities that contribute to their homelessness. So the idea is, as we move forward, to come up with a plan that seeks to address the needs of all types of residents of Winston-Salem. So yes, ma'am, there is a focus on disabilities. Matter of fact, one of the developments that we'll see listed on, I think it's the next slide, is
Okay.
targeted for persons who have disabilities and might be chronically homeless. So that it's down the page some, you see step up conversion.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So just quickly, that is a partnership that the city is working with a national organization. They have a model where they convert underutilized hotels and motels into apartments. They do a more like studio apartments.
Mhm.
And so they'll come in and they'll add little kitchenettes into the rooms. And the primary focus is for people who are disabled, who might be chronically homeless and things of that nature. So in this particular instance, the city is providing the funds for the case management services for the individual. So it's a private entity that's going to pay for the actual conversion of the hotel. And they're trying to figure out which hotel to buy right now. But we've made a 3-year commitment to cover the social services in that particular instance. So what you see here kind of ties back to the number of units and the dollars that we talked about previously, and now I'm right, and they're adding up, right, $84 million. So total development costs, notwithstanding the step up conversion, because we're not putting any cash in that, but the Northwest PSH, that's another permanent supportive housing, again, for people who might have disabilities or may have been homeless. But you'll see here a number of developments that we have in progress at some stage, and because we have the status column there. Some of these were recently approved by council in November to receive some of the ARPA money. So where you see SG Atkins, Christ Rescue Temple, Old Man Ministries, and Boston Thurman, and Habitat, those all are receiving ARPA funding to assist them. CNI phase 1 and 2 up at the top, that's our Choice Neighborhoods Initiative for Cleveland Avenue Homes and the whole redevelopment of that. That is one where HUD awarded the Housing Authority $30 million to redevelop that community. And so the city of Winston-Salem has committed, as you see there, over $12 million so far towards this project, with more to come in future phases. And so the 81 units that you saw under construction on the previous slide is phase 1 of Choice Neighborhoods. And it is actually under construction at the former site of Brown Elementary School. So it's actually down the street a little bit from the actual Cleveland Avenue home site. And so that will help enable us to have one development go up, and then some of the residents at Cleveland Avenue can then just move to the new site to try to minimize some of the relocation that might have to happen.
I have a question.
Sure.
Question.
Sure.
What percentage of these units are under the Housing Authority?
So the Housing Authority has a partnership with McCormick Barron Salazar, that's the developer. 199 of the units will be public housing units. There's a total of 406 units that will be built.
Okay.
So 199 will be public housing. The rest will be at that 60% AMI and above.
When you say public housing, you mean the Housing Authority?
Correct.
With manager?
Well, there's going to be a separate management entity, not just the Housing Authority, because those units will all be mixed in. So, so there's a separate management company, a structure that's been created, but 199 units will be reserved for individuals or families who have that relationship with the Housing Authority.
Okay. Thank you.
certainly. Let's see here. Ridgewood, you'll see that. That is a new development relationship. The city owned many parcels of land in the Ridgewood subdivision and recently agreed to partner with an organization called True Homes. And they are going to buy the units, the lots, the developable lots in Ridgewood, and provide single-family home ownership opportunities. And some of those units will be affordable units as well at Ridgewood. Rams Point, just below that, is a mixture of affordable and market rate. Right now, the city has a commitment to support 6 affordable units. I think it's a total of 20 units at that site, and 6 of them are supposed to be designated as affordable. And we've touched on Northwest, PSH, and Step Up. Pegram Landing is an interesting project in that it is not within the city limits of Winston-Salem. It is in Forsyth County, but the funding that you see there for Pegram Landing, the city funding of $500,000, those are a particular source of funds from HUD called HOME. And Winston-Salem and Forsyth County have what's called a HOME consortium or HOME partnership. And so we receive the HUD funds directly, and then we provide some HUD funds to Forsyth County Community and Economic Development for like down payment assistance and support for first-time home buyers. But then we can also use home funds for affordable developments that take place within Forsyth County. So that's one way that the city and county collaborate, is on first-time home buyers and on multifamily developments in the county. And just as an aside, but related, as it relates to homelessness services, there's a collaboration there as well. Not as robust as we would like, but we do have what's called a continuum of care. And those are all of the agencies that provide shelter and services of various types. And we have what's called the continuum of care. We usually refer to it as a COC. And the members of the board for the COC are appointed by the city council, 5 by the city council, 5 by the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners, and then 5 others from the membership. So we do have some collaboration there as well. And then the last development I want to mention here is what's called the Heights, and a particular piece of that are what's called the Joyway Cottages. This is a location, I don't know if some of you might be familiar with what used to be called the SECU Commons. It was United Health Centers has an office there, and a few other agencies. Family Services is building their new child care center at this location. And so this developer has received assistance commitment from the city to convert a 20-unit single-room occupancy building into 10 one-bedroom apartments, and then develop another set of small cottages for affordable and middle-income tenants as well. So all total, again, these numbers kind of track back to that pie chart on the previous, where you saw the 18 million from the city, and then the 65, right? The 65 is the other money, but you add them together, and that's that 84 that you see on the previous screen, the total development cost. And then, Scott, if you could do the last slide, this kind of gives you a snapshot of where those developments are around the community. And that's the last slide I have. So I can pause at this point and see if there's some questions I can answer for any of you.
I do have a question. Can you go back to the slide where you had the numbers of the costs and the different projects? Like I think it's one more before this, maybe two more. Yeah, this is up. No, go back forward one. Stop. Okay. So I'm looking at this. The Habitat for Humanity project is way cheaper than anything else. Like it's almost as many units as the Cleveland Initiative Phase 1, but it's a fraction of the cost. What's going on there?
That's only infrastructure. That's not for housing.
Thank you.
Okay.
It just seemed bizarre.
And actually, that number for the city funding, we need to adjust that because we did actually increase that in November.
Okay.
So I'm glad I'm looking at that now because that actually ought to be 800, right, Scott? Right. Okay.
It
So
just seemed odd.
I'm glad you called it out so I could remember to fix it.
Well, it just seemed odd because that's like not even $20,000 a unit. Well, the other ones are more like 400,000 to construct. So I mean, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
And two, let me just mention about choice neighborhoods. It's a unique kind of project. So it's not your traditional affordable housing development because it is public housing. You've got a total demolition of a site, and then you're bringing it all back new.
I was more concerned about how cheap the Habitat was, not how expensive the other one was.
Gotcha. Okay. And we always, now you have this here, but when I mentioned earlier about home funding, so every year through another budget process, Habitat receives an allocation from the City of Home Fund to help their home buyers. So that wouldn't be represented here as a development cost. Another question I might be able to answer?
Ms. Newman, I'm not sure if you could answer this, but I'm just going to put it out there. So with the current plan to build the housing in different areas, and at the same time, I hope that we're looking at other ways that we can collaborate with the county. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So with that in mind, is there room to, has there been any consideration into maybe looking at how the city and the county could come together and, for example, put in like a daycare center in one of those areas to address the needs of those mothers, low-income mothers who are having difficulty going to work because of babysitting issue, and it would be right there on site. In addition to maybe having like a center or part of that same center been useful for healthcare, intervention healthcare type of things like mammograms or, even just getting COVID shots or getting the kids the necessary shots. And that way it's like we are still building a community that comprises county and city services all in one. And at the same time, hoping that we are helping those who are less fortunate and have daycare issues, childcare issues, to be able to get to work and become more of a productive citizen and maybe come off of that list of welfare assistance and now into a working, full-time working citizen for the city of Winston-Salem. Just a thought.
Sure. And I mean, ideally that is what community development is all about, right?
Okay.
That's how you create what we call a comprehensive community initiative,
Okay.
where you partner with all of those who bring their strengths and talents to the table, and you plan and collaborate together. One of the things that the city will soon initiate is a process to create an actual plan for, long-term. How do we, for instance, build those 750 units a year, right? The city can't do it alone. We've got to collaborate. We've got to partner, and not just on the governmental level. I mean, we've got to partner with financial institutions, philanthropy. There are a lot of people who need to come to the table to make this happen. And so, my hope is as we start the process that we'll be undertaking, which is an 18-month planning process, and it's modeled actually after a process that was done in New Orleans in response to Hurricane Katrina. And so the organization that led that charge in New Orleans is who the city has contracted with to do a similar process here. And they're doing the process also in I think it's Nashville, Tennessee, as well. But I've had opportunities, thankfully, to work in partnership with the county's Community and Economic Development Department. I think there'll be an opportunity for us to continue to collaborate. We talk regularly and look at things that we can do together. So as just one example, with us working with our homeowners on the lending side, on the rehab side, a lot of times our homeowners are not just low or moderate income, but a number of them are seniors. And sometimes, we have concerns about their ability to really understand all of the documents and papers and things that we have to go through. And every now and the county does rehab as well. So sometimes we even kind of touch the same household depending on the services. But we're finding that, sometimes we need to maybe have an independent third party to kind of sit down and go over everything with that homeowner before they sign on the dotted line. This is a loan and these are the requirements and so forth and so on. And so we've talked about how do we partner on that, right? Do we throw in money together and hire a lawyer that is based at one entity or the other? So we are constantly, as staff, at least, trying to find ways that we can work together where we have that common interest. So I think that, and I'm hopeful that this larger planning process that we're going through, as well as some work that we're doing with the COC, that we can get all of the people around the table, because we have to have those county agencies able and willing to come as well, right? So we keep pushing and inviting with the hope that we can start to create more comprehensive initiatives.
Hey, Marla, so
Thank you.
Sorry. Marla, this made me think of something. Can you put up the map of where everything's located again? Or
Scott's driving.
Scott, I'm sorry, Scott, could you? Yes. That's the very last slide. So I guess most of this seems to be, from my understanding, like well situated along public transit, except for the Landing 2 and Ridgewood. Is that correct? Is this well situated with with public transit, or do we know?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Cool. Okay.
Right, and those are part of the criteria that we look at.
Oh, good. I was going to ask about that. Okay. Cool.
And I'll mention with some of these developments, they also have what are called low-income housing tax credits that are provided by the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. And that's one of the criteria that they score on, is proximity to transportation, groceries, services, and things of that nature. And so that's part of our lens that we look through as well when we're asked to invest, or even when we're provided with opportunities for the city to purchase land to do future development. We go through that. First question always, is it on transit?
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Scott, anything more I should add, or did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. And Marla has a 10 o'clock meeting, and so we will allow her to run to that here in just a few. The conversation that we're going to have going forward is kind of about how other cities and counties work together, specifically on production of affordable housing. And so you heard the county managers, Marla, both Dudley and Lee came to their meeting at the end of November and talked about how the city and county work together and some of the areas that we work together in. So we'll talk a little bit about how some of the other cities and counties are specifically working and funding things But that was one of the things Marla and I had a conversation about. Was there are some differences ideologically between the city council and the board of county commissioners in terms of what they think of as who is responsible for affordable housing and particularly for funding it. So I won't make Marla step into that. What would you do if you were a county commissioner, or how they would respond? But we are going to kind of dive into that conversation just a little bit with some of the other major cities and counties in North Carolina. But I would say historically, and Marla, you can kind of check me here, but historically the city has been doing affordable housing and the county is generally not a funder. There are some very, very limited places. I think the Peters Creek Initiative is one where the county did a very small loan to help that out. But from a cash grant perspective, not very often are they involved at all. So
that's true. That's true. Their primary focus is home ownership. And of course, we need more affordable home ownership, but the housing study and needs assessment that was done in 2018 was for the city and the county. The city commissioned it and paid for it, but it covered the city and the county. And so that 16,000 units, that was rental, more so than single family. But that's where we have a huge deficit. We have a lot of properties in Winston that are older and have a lot of deferred maintenance. And so, sometimes those properties deteriorate to the point where they're obsolete and they just need to be demolished. And the city does quite a bit of demolition. Most of our demolition is single family. However, there are times when multifamily developments are in fact demolished, but a lot of times too, they sit for vacant and boarded up for a long time before they actually get to that point. I think this is a good opportunity, however, for us to do more collaboration, because even though the county is primarily focused on home ownership, Winston-Salem is the biggest municipality in the county. And, we're all Forsyth County residents. So, really being able to have a closer relationship and commitment to housing across the spectrum, single family, multifamily, ownership, rental, that's our community, and that's what our community needs. So I'm looking forward to hearing how collaboration can occur between the city and county on that at that larger level, their policy level.
Well, if there are no other questions for Marla, I will say thank you on behalf of CBAC, and I always learn something every time you're speaking to Marla. So I enjoy this as much as our residents do. So thank you very much. If they have any feedback, we take down any notes, we'll be more than happy to send you any questions, and
Absolutely.
we can get that stuff
Absolutely.
over to Marla and her staff and get it back to you if you have anything after the fact. Don't hesitate to ask staff, and we'll make sure we get it across the street.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share today. I appreciate it. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, Marla. So we are going to transition, and Sheila has joined us. Just wanted to throw out there kind of in the middle. I hope the fire drill went well, Sheila. So we're going to transition a little bit. Janice Hillenbrand, who is a senior analyst here in the office, is going to share two specific examples of some research that we've been doing between cities and counties. The research was mostly focused on the other four largest, what we would call municipal areas. So the Raleigh and Wake County area, Durham City and Durham County. We reached out to Greensboro and Guilford, as well as Charlotte and Macon can talk about those. But Janice is going to share some information here specifically on some of the policy related things that Durham and Durham County are doing together, and talk about Raleigh and Wake. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share that. I'm going to let her jump in. Again, this is designed to be really informal. Ask us any questions that you have. Some of that may direct additional research that we need to do. But this is just some interesting information for context about what some of our other peer jurisdictions are doing at this point. So let me go ahead and share my screen for that. Is everybody seeing? Somebody give me a thumbs up if you're seeing the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, good, great. Janice, if you want to take it away.
Sounds good. And yeah, you can go ahead and jump to the next slide, Scott, if you want. So, as Scott said, my name is Janice. I did reach out to the other big four, which is, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Greensboro, Guilford, Durham, and Raleigh and Wake. And the two primary examples that we're focusing on are the two that I received the most substantial, policy information from, which was City of Durham, Durham County, City of Raleigh, and Wake County. And you can go to the next slide. The first that I'm going to kind of talk through a little bit is going to be City of Durham and Durham County. So I would say Durham is probably the most similar to Forsyth, both in size, but also, structure of their current programming. Just to kind of give an overview of what we'll talk about, what you'll see in Durham a lot is a lot of discussion around better alignment for city and county around affordable housing, but that has not necessarily turned into much concrete or defined joint action as of yet. And I will say in general, when you look across municipalities across the state, city and county joint action on affordable housing is an issue that's still kind of on the precipice. It's still really, really new. And so there is not a lot in way of substantial joint collaboration. So we can go to the next slide. So to talk about how Durham is similar regarding structure, they do have a joint city county planning department. This joint planning department is managed by an interlocal agreement. They split the funding for this department evenly between the city and county, so 50-50. You can go to the next slide. They do have a joint city county planning committee that oversees some of the decisions made in this area. So, and those members are comprised from 3 representatives each from their governing body, as well as ex officio members from each jurisdiction, namely the city and county managers are a part of that. And you can go to the next slide. So having a joint city county.
Quick question. I know that we stated that in Forsyth County, we're the biggest, but there are other municipalities. How does the Durham County, Durham City overlay compare in that perspective?
It's pretty even. Like the city is basically the county, and so they do have a lot of joint services there.
Are there other municipalities in Durham County that compete for that mind share with the county?
No, nothing substantial. No, none. No municipalities that would be substantial. No, it's primarily Durham City and Durham County.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. So the reason why I mentioned the Durham, the joint planning department is for 2 reasons. The first is Durham, they have a comprehensive plan that they're working on. So the last approved comprehensive plan that they approved was in 2005. They are working on approving an updated comprehensive plan for planning. They began updating this plan last fiscal year in FY 22, and they're collecting public comment, have a draft of the plan posted, and are hoping to approve this updated comprehensive plan by the end of FY 23. The significant thing about this comprehensive plan is that they have added a lot of significant language around hoping to expand their collaborations on housing. I put a list of, and you can see it's a pretty long list of goals that they have for affordable housing. So what this is going to turn into, policy-wise, decision making wise, nobody at the city or county is quite sure what that's going to look like yet, but it is a stated goal of their elected officials and of the management of the city and county. It's just waiting to see what that's going to turn into once this plan is adopted. You can go to the next slide, Scott. The other significant thing that the joint city county planning department has done is they have created a more friendly environment, I would say, for the creation of affordable housing with these changes that they made to their unified development ordinance in October of 2019. I have like a little graphic that I stole from one of their documents around these changes, but just to kind of summarize what they were, it was allowing duplexes in all of the urban and suburban residential zoning districts, which was not the case before, decreasing the lot size requirements, decreasing infill standard requirements, as well as changes in allowing more accessory dwelling units within a duplex. So this doesn't necessarily mean like collaboration, but it is it is policy that both the city and county adopted to create a more friendly environment for affordable housing. Yes.
How does this compare with our zoning?
So
Like which of these, like, are we more restrictive, less restrictive, comparable, or does anybody know?
Janice, I'll jump in and take that one and you can kind of back me up on it. So what I would say for what Janice has shown you in the last two slides is we're probably a couple of years behind Durham City and Durham County. So we did just recently in 2022 pass an ADU or accessory dwelling unit change to our UDO. So you can see from this that they did that in 2019. I think most of the other cities, major cities in North Carolina had done that. And we were a little bit behind in getting that. Quite frankly, we looked, everyone else was doing it. The benchmark was doing it. So we did it. On the comprehensive planning side, we are just now at the beginning phases of reaching out and getting public input for an update to Legacy 2030, which is the city and county comprehensive plan. And so from speaking with an assistant city manager, we know that affordable housing is going to be one of those things that the city and county are both going to be looking at. Will be very interesting to see the policy goals from the city perspective as well as the county perspective and how they differ. And it again appears that just based on the cycle, Durham is a little bit ahead of us. So it'll be several years before we get all of that put together and have an actual update to the comprehensive plan for both the city and the county. But it's very much a part of the conversation is what are the policy goals of both of those jurisdictions with respect to affordable housing.
So Scott, I kind of figured that part about the comprehensive plan, and I do remember the whole ADU unit last year. My question is, are we also sort of, I guess, not quite a couple of years behind on the infill and the duplexes as well, or are we comparable to them right now?
So that is a question we'd have to reach out to planning to really answer.
Okay.
From. Does our UDO look like theirs? And is the question you're asking, do our ordinances match what theirs match, or is it
Basically,
actually getting the development?
Basically, because these are all good ordinance for, getting more housing. I was just wondering, and I do remember the ADU thing from last year. I was just wondering, are we comparable to them or not, and zoning for more housing or not? Basically, this slide in particular, right here.
We can reach out specifically on the duplexes. I know on the ADU side and also on what we would call the cottage court side, those were ones where we had looked at our peer jurisdictions and we were behind, and our UDOs were updated last year for both of those. But we can definitely reach out to planning and get you a little bit more information on these types of UDO changes.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Janice.
No, you're good. Because I was going to say, I would not be able to provide specific comparisons on the policies and how exactly you compare. So it would be better for me to go back to planning, and I can, at the next meeting, I can show a breakdown of how our zoning regulations compare, not just to Durham, but maybe some other areas too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay. So we can go to the next slide. So City of Durham does have a community development department similar to the City of Winston-Salem. However, there is not any formal joint city-county alliance for any robust long-term programming. What I was able to get from the city and county is that there is sort of like some informal ad hoc project support, when the opportunity arises for specific programming, but nothing that is long lasting or long term or is even like a formal contractual obligation. So I'm going to go through some examples of some previous projects that the city and county have collaborated on in the last couple of fiscal years that are related to affordable housing, but these are not currently active. From what I understand, there are not really any current active formal financial agreements between the city and county, but that is something that management and the elected officials are working towards right now in Durham. So the first is this unsheltered coordinating agency. This was a contract jointly funded by the city and county with Housing of New Hope to provide outreach to connect unsheltered Durham residents to housing services and an encampment site at a former police station site for unsheltered residents. And so this has a lot to do with like the homeless population and addressing homeless needs within the city of Durham. The next project, Scott. This is coronavirus related CDBG grants. So the city and county both received these grants. They decided to combine their funding and combine their efforts rather than doing separate programming with the same type of funding, and provided emergency rental assistance for households and are working together to get more funding to collaborate to continue this emergency rental assistance. The third project that I have is an actual substantial affordable housing project that both the city and county collaborated on in FY 2019. So this was a city-led initiative that they got funding from not just the county, but also Durham Public Schools and HUD to complete this project. But this was an affordable housing project where they redeveloped an old high school. It was Veranda at Whitted School. It had a historical significance to its community because it was the first high school built to educate African Americans within Durham. They decided to redevelop this abandoned property to provide 79 units of affordable senior housing for those over the age of 62. And they also created a new preschool, affordable preschool, pre-kindergarten site that has 8 classrooms. And so this was a significant project that they gave as an example of how they've collaborated, but this was really the only recent example of a substantial affordable housing project that they provided that has happened in the last couple of fiscal years. So the last example of collaboration is actually on the county side. And so within the Department of Social Services in Durham County, there is a low income homeowner relief program. And so this is where DSS provides property tax help on current taxes for those who need it, as long as they meet certain requirements. And so it's an application-based program, and they have a tiered income model to determine how much assistance you can receive. And so the collaboration here is that the city provides funding to Durham County for a couple of positions to help review applications from city residents within this program. And that is all of the collaboration at Durham County and Durham City. And I will say, you would think they would do a lot more. I feel like they do a really good job of advertising the areas in which they do collaborate. But right now it really is more discussion based rather than action and programming based. The next program that we're going to talk about, it has to do with City of Raleigh and Wake County. I will say that the City of Raleigh and Wake County is ahead of the curve, not just for us, but also most other jurisdictions in the state. They do have a bit more robust collaboration, and something that is unique with City of Raleigh and Wake County is that they both have their own unique housing departments that do robust housing programming separate of each other. And they have done really, really well to collaborate on certain housing efforts. And this is definitely unique because if you look across the state, most counties don't have their own unique housing department with robust affordable housing programming. It's usually a city function with the county providing occasional support, which is what you see in Durham and Mecklenburg. So the first program is House Wake. This was a COVID-19 financial assistance program. This was a tri-party contract between the City of Raleigh, Wake County, and Telamon Corporation. They provided emergency rental and utility assistance programming. And so that basically covered rent and utility shortfalls or resulting from the financial hardship that the people experienced during COVID-19. You can see the funding that both the city and Wake County combined and for this contract. And what you'll find a lot with these contracts for programming between City of Raleigh and Wake County, which makes sense, is while the funds that Wake County commits can be applied to all Wake County residents, including those within the City of Raleigh, the funds that City of Raleigh provide to these contracts can only be applied to City of Raleigh residents in the application process. So the next program, and this is the big collaboration that I feel like is the most significant to take note of. This is the Affordable Housing Preservation Fund. So this is something that they begun recently, and it's a multi-year contract between the City of Raleigh, Wake County, and Self-Help Ventures Fund. And it's to preserve existing and naturally occurring affordable housing, which is federally unsubsidized housing. And so what we have so far is the City of Raleigh has contributed $4 million to this fund. Wake County has contributed $10.5 million towards this fund, and they are working with Self-Help Ventures Fund to get investments from, Fortune 500 companies, primarily banks at this point, like Wells Fargo, BB&T, I believe CQ, State Employees Credit Union. They have all invested. And so now this fund currently sits around $61 million. And so what this fund does is Self-Help Ventures Fund has the ability to provide loans to developers and nonprofits to buy property that comes on the market immediately and then make it affordable housing. And so this allows flexibility because typically in this process, without a fund like this, developers will have to go to the separate governing bodies and solicit funds. Here you have one large pot of money, and it allows the developers to be more competitive and be more responsive to the competitive real estate market to purchase funds and to purchase property as it becomes available and create affordable housing with it. So far, the projects that have been funded have been with 2 nonprofits, affordable housing related nonprofits buying property and creating affordable rental properties, primarily in the downtown area of City of Raleigh. So the next example is gap financing. So this is more of ad hoc collaboration between the city and county. This is not managed by any sort of formal agreement. So from what I understand from talking to the City of Raleigh Planning Director, City of Raleigh will invest in affordable housing development if they have an issue where they need more gap financing. So gap financing means that the rent on these properties does not cover the long-term debt of the project. They'll approach the county and tell the county, hey, we need some more gap financing for this project, and the county will commit funds to a development project. And this just happens on an ad hoc basis, as needed, and is not managed by a formal agreement. But from what I understand from talking to the City of Raleigh, there is an understanding there, and they do collaborate frequently. So we can go to the next project. So the next 2 examples are going to be future collaboration examples. So these projects are ones where talking to Raleigh and Wake where collaboration will be happening, but they're in discussion right now. So the first is with home ARP funding that the City of Raleigh and Wake County both were awarded in FY22. These plans are still drafts and are awaiting approval, but essentially the funding can be used by the jurisdiction to provide rental housing, tenant-based rental assistance, supportive services, and non-congregate shelters to reduce homelessness. The City of Raleigh received $5.2 million and Wake County received $3.5 million. And from what I understand from talking to the individual in the planning department, they let me know that the plan is, once both of these plans are approved, for both the City of Raleigh and Wake County to combine their funding and do a collaborative effort with this grant funding. The next area for future collaboration is homelessness prevention efforts. And so City of Raleigh and Wake County both receive regular entitlement grants and emergency solution grants. And so in previous, practice every few years, they would just meet and collaborate and, discuss areas where they are addressing homelessness and, how, they could kind of, approach the gaps in each other's services. From what I understand, there is more of an interest on the city and county side on doing a collaborative effort for homelessness prevention efforts moving forward. So this is something that they're in discussion right now. It hasn't turned into anything substantial policy-wise, but it's in the works. And so that is everything on the Wake County side. So are there any questions so far?
Janice, I do want to jump in real quick on something that got mentioned a couple of times there. So we did, CBAC did ARPA last year as kind of your work plan, talking about all that. And in Janice's slides here, you saw several different types of coronavirus related stimulus funding. So what she called CDBG CV was community development block grant, specifically from coronavirus fiscal relief funding. You saw home ARP funds. So that's housing production from the American Rescue Plan Act. And then specifically in Durham, or I think it was Durham, I can't remember if it's Durham or Wake County here, the use of that third party Telemon group to do emergency rental assistance programming. So ERAP, or emergency rental assistance programming, was directly from U.S. Treasury. It was another round of stimulus related to COVID. And I will note that in many of those cases, actually Wake here, as we see, but the city of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County actually used this exact same third-party service for our ERAP programming in terms of doing rental assistance. So some of the areas that have collaboration there are one-time funding related to coronavirus. And in some of those cases, we also mirrored some of the partnerships But those are not intended on our end, at least in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, to be long-term things. It was money came in from the federal government. We got a third party to kind of administer the city versus county piece. And Janice even noted that the Wake County money could be used inside the city. When we set up ours originally, the county said, no, our county money is only to be used outside of the city, kind of thing. So there are some differences in policy there, but did want to note there is some overlap in terms of a lot of that, what I'll call just COVID funding that came through and how it got used. I'll stop the screen share. More than happy to share it and go back to any of that. The other thing I would say, and Janice really hit this, Wake and Raleigh are working together. They have a formalized agreement with a housing trust fund of sorts. Conversations with Durham, they're looking in that general direction, and I think would like to fund some things. In talking with the budget director in Durham County, the county has actually done some funding for affordable housing without the city, but it was related to units downtown, and the county ended up funding projects that had parking decks attached to them. So they were also thinking of that kind of as an economic development type deal. So it wasn't that they were just in the affordable housing ballgame, but that they were issuing debt for parking decks tied to some affordable housing that would also be used as an economic development engine. So the takeaway, I think, and Janice cut me off here, is Raleigh and Wake is probably ahead of the curve and a better model to look at in terms of how to start collaboration and where those conversations might go with Forsyth County. Durham may be there in the next 18 to 24 months in terms of getting things a little more formalized, and we're just a little further behind the curve in really substantially starting a conversation around who's responsible for affordable housing and what are those funding mechanisms and what do they look like. I will spend just a second. We did reach out to some other folks. Janice noted that Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, obviously very huge. Mecklenburg County does a lot with rental subsidies that we know about. There was, I think, just like Durham, though, very much an ad hoc basis. The city talks to the county, they jointly fund something only if it comes before both boards and both boards agree with it. They did have one specific project out there right now that they're playing well with. When you saw the presentation that we gave in November, we showed the Charlotte Housing Trust Fund out there. I will say the Charlotte Housing Trust Fund is basically subsidized only by the city of Charlotte. So if you see a lot of that stuff out there, know that Mecklenburg County is not throwing a lot of money into that pot. The city of Charlotte is essentially issuing $50 million in general obligation bonds every other year to fund that. But in talking with them too, and again, Janice, correct me here, but it's on an ad hoc basis. I think they would like to have some more conversations about formalizing something, but they just haven't gotten there either. So the way that Janice described it as being on the precipice, this is really kind of one of those emerging issues where cities and counties are trying to figure out whose responsibility it is and who should really have some skin in the game in terms of money. And we may be just a little further behind the schedule with some of the conversations that our neighboring jurisdictions are having. So any general comments, questions, or areas you'd maybe like to see a little more research on this? I'm looking around, not seeing a whole lot there.
So I have a question, Scott.
Yes, ma'am.
So what is the charge to CBAC from the mayor and the commissioners? What is our charge?
So your charge generally is to look into this and make potential recommendations about areas where you think the city and county might want to engage really in conversations about more collaboration. So it may be that you recommend very highly that the city have more formalized discussions with the county about the current comprehensive plan that's being updated. Making sure, again, as Fred noted, if there are other areas where the city and county can get UDOs in compliance with what others are doing, and potentially if you see in other areas, things that formalized agreement between Raleigh and Wake County, recommend that the city look with the county at opportunities to have some kind of joint funding mechanism for property acquisition or development for affordable housing. So, I mean, really, it's see what the other cities and counties are doing. If there's any of that you think makes sense, provide a recommendation to city council to have staff look very much more directly into what one jurisdiction is doing and bring some information for the city council where they might talk to the county about how to formalize something. That's kind of what I see your role here as. Or if you don't see anything you like, you could also recommend not doing anything. I don't know that will be the case, but
okay, my last question is, okay, is it possible to get us information or just a name of the organization that Marla talked about, that we have extended a hand out and they haven't responded? So do we need to continue to communicate with those people, or should we move on, to the next group of county folks?
Are you talking about specifically elected officials or staff at the county?
She didn't say specifically. She said, well, we extended invitations and they haven't accepted. Who they are, I'm not sure.
We can get back with Marla on exactly who she has spoken with and how those conversations take place. I think realistically, and you heard the managers talk about this in late November, there are different policy goals at the board level between the city and the county. And so some of the recommendation may be just having some really structured conversation about seeing where our goals actually align and the small workspace that we can be in together to focus on collaborative funding strategies for some of this. But yeah, we can definitely reach out to Marla. I know she has a really good working relationship with Kyle Haney, who's the Community and Economic Development, that may be the wrong title, but Community and Economic Development Director over at the county. Staff always is very good about talking to each other and sharing information. But again, once it gets to the board level, there are the political considerations of who should fund what. Again, we can definitely reach out to Marla, see who she's talked to, and if you might want to have some follow-up or recommendations related to with whom those conversations may be more effective.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Hey, so Scott, just Seta's comments inspired some questions for me. So first of all, you mentioned the comprehensive plan that's being updated for housing affordability. Are there, what is the county's role in that? So I get the impression the county and city aren't talking a whole lot. That could be a false impression. But is the county involved in this update of this comprehensive plan, or is it mostly a city thing, or what's going on?
So it is being done by the joint city-county planning department.
So it is, okay.
And I will tell you, Janice and I were actually just talking with the assistant city manager over top of planning and development services earlier this morning. So generally, that comprehensive plan is both adopted by the city and the county.
Okay.
He was relaying to us, it would be unusual, but not off the radar for the county to adopt a different or amended version of it, where the goals for the county were not exactly the same as the goals for the city. So they're really just queuing up now and doing the public input component of this. It will be very interesting to see whether or not those goal statements between the city and county align specifically as it relates to affordable housing.
Okay, so there is active discussion then between the city and county right now. Okay.
Yeah.
So since it's up for public input, I suppose you can share the draft with us then?
So they're not at a draft phase for this yet. When I say up for public input, the whole process actually starts with public input. So planning is just now coordinating efforts to go out in different communities and ask, basically, what do you want your neighborhood to look like 20, 30 years from now?
Oh, so this is way in the beginning stages.
Yeah.
Okay. This is okay. Okay. Well,
Do they go out with a blank slate, or do they have some talking points that we could see?
We can definitely reach out to planning and see what they put together. Like I said, they are super early in this process. It was an FY23, so here in the next 6 months goal, just to get the thing kicked off. And it's usually a 2 to 3 year process to update the comprehensive plan. So definitely can reach out to planning and development services and see if they've got, graphics and talking points or marketing things that they've put together. But I don't know that they've even set the dates yet for those public input sessions in different parts of the city and county. But more than happy to get that information and pass it along.
Scott, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
What is the impetus for the city to reach out to the county for more collaboration?
What is the impetus? So why would we do this? I think generally at a high level, the notion is the more money you can throw at affordable housing, the more affordable housing you can construct. So Marla told you there's a deficit of 16,000 units across the county. If the city is the only player in both gap financing or cash grant financing for projects, then only so much can be built. If the county would partner with the city in some of these projects, the city could then stretch its other dollars even further. So it's really about how many units can you build and how quickly can you do it? And if you got more money in the game, you could probably build more units more quickly.
Thank you.
Did Marla explain how they came up with the estimate of 16,000 unit gap?
So at a very high level, I have not read this whole report. It is extremely long and very dense, but they did, it's not just how many houses we needed right now. It was a population projection. So they very much looked at census data, looked at all of the units that we currently have. So pulled tax parcel data to look at rental units versus single family housing units, sorted them into size and cost metrics, and then basically projected what parts of the population were going to be changing over the next 10 to 15 years and what type of units would be needed to meet those needs. So that report, and I think it's out on the community development website, will actually show you the number of affordable housing units you need by AMI level, but then also by age group. And so it talked about the number of senior living assisted facility units you would need. And they may have done transitional housing needs too as well. It was a pretty long study, but it's very detailed in terms of not just the total number of units, but breaking it down by different income levels and different age groups, what type of units would be needed.
Okay,
This is a needy ask. Can I ask that you would send us the link to the community development website, please?
Let us find the link directly to that too, and we'll send you that report straight too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay, Scott, I think this is going to be my last question. I can't guarantee it, but do you know if there are any federal funding or state funding for collaborative efforts between the city and county?
So that is a tricky question to ask. I don't know that there is federal funding that would mandate a city and county to work together in order to get it. Choice Neighborhoods that Marla talked about obviously is this $100+ million renovation of the Cleveland Avenue Homes area. And that's really HUD providing money to the housing authority and the city being a part of that. The county hasn't contributed any money really to Choice Neighborhoods. There are some state grants. You heard Marla talk about LIHTCs or low income housing tax credits. And I don't know that any of those require collaboration to get them. They just require that you meet a lot. There's a very extensive criteria. Marla talked a little bit about, relation to transit lines and that kind of stuff, but they have a long checklist, and then they actually grade everyone, and you get a number grade, like an 85 out of 100. And they fund the ones at the top. So are there federal monies available for affordable housing production? Yes, and probably more coming, we would assume, in the coming years. I don't know that any of those would actually require collaboration. So they may be things that the city just goes after to help us fund projects, but I don't know that the county would be applying for any of those, or maybe even, so this may be one of those recommendation type things Hayseto was, having the county be a joint applicant and just expressing that there's an overall desire for the need throughout the county for affordable housing, even if the city is really kind of the lead applicant. Maybe having the county join in and saying that they're interested in partnering. If they would provide funding of some kind that might be helpful as a leverage in some of those projects, thinking about how they get scored at the federal level. But I can ask that question of our federal lobbyist, but I don't know of anything that requires city and county collaboration in order to apply for it.
So Scott, this might be answered in the link you send us, but when they did the review of how many units there were across the county, did they do it sort of by location as well? So I could imagine that the city might have way more needs than the actual county if you see, do it by, say, census block or something. Do they get that granular in terms of where the needs would be, assuming people don't, move?
So that is getting a little outside of my area of expertise in terms of what's in that report. My answer to that question is from conversations that happened years ago when council was getting that. I think the answer is yes. And they specifically looked at rental units in more dense areas versus kind of the single family housing units that you get in less dense areas. But I want to be very careful in that. That's my recollection of
Okay,
how.
I'll look at the report when you send it to us.
Okay. Any other general questions in nature? Otherwise, the other two things on the agenda, one was election of chair and vice chair. Again, we only have 4 members today, so that might be one that we punt again until we get at least 5 folks and get an official quorum. Date and time for the next meeting. So we had settled on these 9 a.m. timeframes. February 15th is the date of the next one. We will go ahead and send out an invitation with a Zoom link here. Get that on everybody's calendars. If you have any issues with that date, let us know, but that's based on what we heard back from everybody doing the scheduling of these in the morning hours instead going forward. Next month, as we talk about the work plan, we had talked about affordable housing, some of those social services places is what we'll probably end up talking about next month in collaboration on different types of social services. And then this group was very interested in the law enforcement collaboration component that the city and county manager talked about. So that law enforcement piece is probably one that we'll talk about 2 months from now as we begin to wrap up. So I'm thinking about this report and your recommendations. Probably affordable housing is one that we know city council is very interested in. So some research in that area, a little more generally in where collaboration is happening in these other social service areas, and then maybe a section specifically on law enforcement as well, if that works well for the group.
I think that makes sense.
All righty. Well, we've got some questions and some research to do here that we'll try and get back to you definitely before the next meeting. We will send out the materials here. Sheila, I emailed you the slides that Marla was talking from. I will say, unfortunately, they're kind of short and she did a lot of talking from the slides. So if you have any questions about those, specifically that one that has a lot of metrics on it, with percentages and total numbers for leverage, that kind of stuff, give me a call and we can kind of work through what she was talking about there. If you have any specific questions, more than happy to kind of get you an update there.
All right, thank you so much.
Scott, I do have a question. Last meeting I had to leave a little early, so I missed a little bit of the presentation. Can you send me those slides?
Absolutely. I will send out Marla's, Janice's from today, and then we'll send out the slides from the last presentation as well to everybody. Absolutely. With nothing else on the agenda, we will grant you back 30 minutes of your time this morning. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you again in about 4 weeks.
Thanks, Scott.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.